Welcome to Diaspora, the show where we share the remarkable stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. I'm your host, Aditya, and each week we sit down with individuals who have made the journey over and explore their experiences, their challenges, their triumphs. We delve into their unique perspectives on adapting to a new culture while staying connected to their roots. Our guest for today is Jawahar Shah, and I can call him Jay. He's born and raised in New Delhi, and he first moved to the US to do part of his MBA. And then he went back and then back to the US for a second master's degree at Columbia. And then he spent time on the East Coast and has about 15 years of experience in the energy sector with a focus on net zero and energy transition. And currently he's a director with National Grid. So Jawahar, welcome to the show.
Aditya, pleasure being here. And I just at the very outset want to say this is such an important topic that you touch upon. So I'm very glad to be here to talk about it.
Thank you so much for that. Nothing like some early morning appreciation. So first question for you. If New Delhi was a North American city, what would it be?
I've actually thought about this for a very long time, and not just because because of this conversation, but when I first moved to the US, my first port of entry, if you will, was New York City. Mm-hmm. And I had always seen it in TV and like TV shows and movies, but it didn't feel real until you step into the city. And I had to say that it reminded me of home a lot. And it's probably a little bit different because you would typically think Washington, D.C. might be closer to New York City because of seats of government and things like that. But honestly, the amount of energy and the amount of like just diversity and sheer number of people on the road, it reminds me of Delhi. And Mumbai has never really struck me as home. So
well, I mean, we people from Bombay already claimed New York as the comparison.
You have?
The whole Bombay-Delhi rivalry gets discussed a fair bit on our show. And that leads me to my next question, that your last name is Shah, which can be a Gujarati last name. It can be a Muslim last name. I know many people in Pakistan with that last name as well. So what's the origin of your last name? And if you can speak more to that on the story behind the last name.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last name it obviously comes from my dad's side, who is from South India, from Kerala. And my mom is Gujarati. So there is a Gujarati element to my last name, but it comes from my dad's side. So my mom is Gujarati. Her last name was not Shah, or obviously her maiden name, but she's Gujarati. So I would almost say that, I can qualify this name as belonging to both Gujarati as well as South India from my dad's family.
That's interesting because I've never heard anyone from Kerala with that last name.
I get that a lot. Yeah, I think it's not very common. That's true.
Yeah. I would always equate it to like the Shah being like a ruler, and kind of a lot of Gujaratis took that name. So then, being in the heart of North India, we talk a lot on the show about the Gujarati experience in Bombay because it used to be one state called the Bombay province or presidency of Bombay or something on those lines. But that whole north-south divide that we have, was that felt on a day-to-day when you were growing up, or did it not really matter?
So I have to say that I had a little bit of probably a different experience growing up in Delhi. Like you wouldn't expect too much of a Gujarati culture being so dominant in Delhi.
Right.
But I happened to go to a school that was run by the Gujarat Education Society. So I went to Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, SPV, which is a school in Delhi that has all grades from like kindergarten to 12th grade. I basically joined right from the beginning. And because it was run by the Gujarat Education Society, a lot of teachers were Gujarati. There were lots of kids who came from Gujarati families. And we actually had a coursework in modern Indian languages, including Gujarati. So it was part of our coursework. So I would say that it was actually a pretty interesting way of remaining in touch with my Southern or, Western roots while being in Delhi. So it was actually a fantastic immersion experience, if you will.
Oh, yeah. I went to a Gujarati school in Bombay as well. They had, until 4th grade, it was a Gujarati medium, but I came in from the 5th grade. So my Gujarati was terrible. And even now, there's a famous Gujarati magazine called Chitralekha. And it's like a globally read by the entire Gujarati diaspora. And I was featured in it. And there was an article on me. It took me like 2 days to read my own article because I'm not so proficient in the reading and writing piece. But I did learn Gujarati, and it was a school that had Gandhian values, and It was right next to where the Quit India movement started, so it was very immersed in history and Gujarati culture and Gujarati literature, all of that. So that when I look back, I'm very lucky to have had that experience. And we did the same for my son. He's
Mhm.
now 6, but his preschool was like an Indian immersion preschool. And it's got links with the ISKCON temple.
Mhm.
So they teach you Montessori, but they also teach you yoga and Sanskrit, and they celebrate Indian holidays as well. And you get vegetarian Indian food. So he spoke only Gujarati till he was 2. And
That's
then he
incredible.
got this immersion. Yeah. So it kind of, we try to do the same with my son as well.
Mhm.
So once you did your undergrad, you spent part of your MBA in the US. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it was actually a little bit unusual, if I can say so, because once I finished undergrad, like usually you would have two paths, right? Like go into the work market, the job market for a
Yeah.
few years, gain experience, or go straight into a master's. And I had been kind of deciding which way to go. I had a job offer in hand right after undergrad. Nothing great, but starting position, whatever money that was at the time looked appealing. But on the other hand, I had this option of going to at the time it was called the Tata Energy Research Institute, or TERI,
Mm-hmm.
which is a organization known mostly for research and environmental science and looking at how can corporate responsibility go hand in hand with sustainability. So that organization was actually just launching its first batch of its MBA program. And that program was very specifically tied to infrastructure. And I was always fascinated with infrastructure because I had done my undergrad in economics and capital markets, and I had been interested in how infrastructure plays such a key role in almost any industry, and especially for development needs. So I was fascinated by that topic, an MBA focused just on infrastructure. So I decided to go into that TERI program instead of taking up a job offer.
Yeah.
And that program, which I didn't know at the time when I signed up for it, actually was working on a exchange program with Yale University. And it was a program with their School of Forestry and Environmental Affairs and School of Management. So you could basically pick and choose your coursework from those schools, and they had students coming into this campus as well in Delhi. So I happened to get picked for that exchange program. So basically, I spent my first year at our TERI campus, which at that time was in the India Habitat Center in New Delhi. So I spent my first year there, and then my second year in New Haven, where the two campuses at Yale that I mentioned
Yeah.
were located.
If I may ask, how old were you when you went to Yale?
Oh, I was, let's see, that would have been 2008. Yeah, so I was basically just under 30. I was like 28 when I first went to university.
Okay. How did that 1 year change you as a person, apart from the learning that you got from the educational institution? What was the impact on your personality, way of thinking, way of life?
You know, I haven't really thought about it quite that way, but it was profound, right? It was like a big shift from what I had experienced. And I think I would break it out into two pieces. One was academically, the way of disseminating academic information, the way you would show up in class, do
Yeah.
project work,
Yeah.
was very different from what I had experienced. It was a lot more about collaboration and teamwork and really learning to work with people as much as learning the skills or the coursework. So,
Yeah.
kind of balancing that was really interesting. And then the second part that took me a little bit more by surprise was how important your social life was. Like, it wasn't just about not being lonely, but it was more about networking and about learning to take the full maximum advantage of whatever was at offer on campus.
Yeah.
And my mom always told me this, right? Never turn down an opportunity. And I think that is something I took to heart when I first went to Yale, because it was just full of opportunity. There were like seminars, lectures, coffee chats, meet and greets
Yeah.
all the time, like, as you know, of course, from UT and elsewhere. But I think that was something that I was like, I need to throw myself into this. I really need to go in with a attitude of just embracing everything and trying out everything. So I was
Yeah.
part of a lot of classes that I didn't really need to take, but I was just interested. I was
Yeah.
part of a lot of clubs, just going and checking out different things. So just very fascinating experiences and a lot of very interesting people that I'm still in touch with, even though it was just 1 year.
Yeah.
I'm still in touch with a lot of my classmates from that 1 year, which I think is testament to
Yeah.
how important that year was.
Yeah, I had none of this foresight in my undergrad. I was
Mhm.
probably an idiot 17-year-old. But
As we all were.
when I went for my MBA at the London Business School, I went in with a vengeance and really got my fill at the buffet that the MBA program is.
Mhm.
So I totally relate to that. When you moved back after that 1 year,
Mhm.
was there anything about life in India that now irritated you or annoyed you, which earlier you didn't notice for, because you just didn't know?
Yeah, and I have actually a very funny example for this. But
Yeah.
you know what? I just realized that I misspoke when I first told you when I moved. I was actually 23 when I moved to
Okay.
New Haven
Yeah.
at that time, so I just got my
Yeah.
math wrong. But in any case, the thing that I noticed, which was really annoying to me when I came back, and I think it still annoys me now, is how the concept of lining up and being patiently in a queue
Yeah.
just seems like such a foreign concept. Like at airports, at immigration lines, at baggage check, just the entire process of coming
Yeah.
back and just waiting in a line to get your turn
Yeah.
was just something that I was so happy seeing. And just
Yeah.
then not having that, just being back in the ways of, just like trying to go and
Yeah.
jostle and get things done. I think that kind of impatience, I guess would
Yeah.
be a word, but it could be described as just culturally a difference
Yeah.
was something that was really interesting to me. And it was like something that took me a while to,
Yeah.
not be as irritated by. And then even though I was in New Haven, New York, and kind of in that area where, traffic isn't the best, like coming back, it just struck me at how much worse traffic is.
Yeah.
Simply because I had, when I came back to Delhi, the job that I took was in Gurgaon. So I had to commute
Yeah.
basically an hour each way, even though it was what, like 10 miles or
Yeah.
less.
Yeah.
And it was incredible.
Yeah, so several points to note. So, hallmark of high context cultures is that they don't stand in queues. And the US is a very low context culture. India is a very high context culture. And then when you combine that with a scarcity mindset that in our country, entire generations have grown up with during like the 70s, the license trial and the ration, everything was, in short supply.
Yeah.
So if you notice you're at a stoplight and you move your car a little bit front, the other person is also going to do the same.
Yep.
As if, the road's going to be over or there's not enough road. But I have a similar story when I had just moved back. McDonald's was a new thing in India and, lining up to order your food and there was a queue. So one day I was just standing there first in line and just looking up at the menu and the cashier, she was standing there looking at me. But because she hadn't called me, I didn't go because that's what you do here.
Right.
And this other guy just comes in from the exit side and goes straight in and orders. And this cashier starts taking the order. And and I was like, yo, like what are you doing? And the guy looks at me and says, you weren't paying attention, so it's not my fault.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
then I looked at the cashier, like, come on, you're the ombudsman here, like,
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I'm already taking the order. I start punching it in. These things, for me, the lack of personal space, like just physically and in life, like
Yeah.
I'm an ambivert, so I need to recharge after social interactions. But that concept didn't exist. And if you leave enough space in the queue, someone else will just come and stand right in the middle.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
And I
yeah.
really like how you put it, right? It's a combination of like historical context and just like the culture.
Yeah.
And it puts that in perspective because like it's not meant to be offensive. It is just a way of being. And I think
Yeah.
it's just getting used to different styles.
Yeah, and so most people are blissfully unaware that
Exactly.
this is bothering someone else. Like that situational awareness in general is missing in the culture as a whole.
And especially when you or I, like when we get taken out of that culture or context and then put it back in, that's when you can really notice those differences.
Yeah, and it's always easier for a high context person to go to a low context culture than the other way around. Because you have to pick up things from the air and understand the context of what's really going on. And in a high context culture, you don't know what you don't know if you are from low context. Because you will take everything at face value. Whereas for the high context person, they're reading into every single thing and interpreting that this actually he said this, but this means that.
That is
And
true.
it's on my show notes in previous episodes, but I might add this whole brief on high versus low context cultures once again. It's a fascinating topic, and it really explains so many things that Indian people feel when they come here
Yeah.
and vice versa. And India is the extreme high context.
I
And
see.
US and Scandinavia are extreme low context. So these two cultures could not be more opposite
Wow.
that way. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, I would love to hear more about it from
Yeah.
you in later
I
shows.
used to give lectures to visiting American MBA students in India on cultural dimensions of doing business in India, and why this context matters, because if someone tells you this is the deadline, then you assume that is the deadline, but in India that's not the deadline.
Yeah.
Because on that day they'll say, oh yeah, we need one more day or whatever, right? Like
Right.
all of those things come into that. It also speaks to like power distance between you and
Okay.
your boss. It also speaks to like how loud public spaces are, how forthright people are with their emotions, how collective a culture is, and lots of other things. So it's a very interesting way to dissect like the society and the culture.
For sure.
Okay, let's go into our first break now. And when we return, we'll talking about the master's experience and how you launched your career in the US. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages.
Talking about guns with others might not always feel comfortable, but it could save a life. Here's a way to start a conversation. Your family is going over to your neighbor's home for dinner for the first time. How would you ask if there are any unlocked guns in the home?
Hey!
Hey, we're so excited for tonight. Before we come over, though, may I ask if there are any unlocked guns in your home?
Our guns are stored securely, locked in a safe that the kids can't access.
Awesome.
Learn how to have the conversation at agreetoagree.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Ready to shake things up? Try Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We're talking to Jay Shah. He's an energy sector executive and a Delhi wala. Before we get back to talking to Jay, I want you to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our episodes in video format there, right from the first one. So once you came back, you were in India for about 4 years, and then you went back to the US for your master's. So what prompted you to do a second master's degree?
There were a couple of reasons. So when I came back to India, like I think that was sort of my first ever real job, right? And that was at PwC in their advisory practice. So I was basically thrust right into the world of consulting. And I was obviously an analyst and kind of working my way up over the 4 years. And one of the things I realized is that I had been interested in infrastructure, but specifically at having started at PwC in their advisory practice, I just happened to be in the energy sector and the energy role, given the coursework that I had picked up during my MBA.
Yeah.
And so I was in the energy space, and I realized how critical infrastructure is to energy, but equally how critical policies, regulations, and just market structures are for energy systems to work. And I just felt like I just didn't know enough of that side of the puzzle. And so I kept feeling this gap in my couple of years while working at PwC, working on really important environment, climate, energy related topics, but realizing it's not just about the infrastructure side, but also on the financing of how you make that happen, the policies that let it grow, the regulations that protect it. I think those parts is what I really wanted to build up. So I'd been looking at different options, and one option that stood out to me was at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs had a program on energy and environment science. It was a master's that kind of really, at least looking through the coursework, I thought was very elegantly spanning all of these topics, focusing just on the things that I seem to care about.
Okay.
So that was really appealing. And I did, of course, like as you would, looked at other programs and courses as well. And the other option that I had, which I came this close to picking, which was a completely different direction of going into sort of academics, but there was a PhD program in pretty much similar topics in Australia. And it was sponsored and funded by a major Australian energy firm. So it had pathways to go into industry once you kind of finish your PhD program. So it was alluring from that perspective as well. And I can't lie, I spent a lot of time deliberating between these two options, a lot of advice and consultation before picking Columbia.
Yeah. So, Jay, the master's at Columbia, how different was that program in terms of your educational experience versus your first stint at Yale?
Yeah, I think it was different because unlike when I was at Yale, at Columbia, I knew exactly what I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted to work towards and learn and develop my skill sets at. Mm-hmm. And I knew almost exactly the kind of job I wanted afterwards. So it was a very deliberate sort of stint at Columbia. And because I had done kind of relevant coursework and like experience, I managed to squeeze down my 2-year master's into a year and a half and kind of like really just focus on getting the things that I wanted, including a guaranteed job offer at the end, which I was really lucky to be able to do. But I think the main difference, in my opinion, was just how focused my 1.5 years at Columbia were. Yeah. It was a really intense time because I had just taken on coursework and job applications and networking all at the same time and trying to squeeze it all in. Plus, I had existing friends who were in the city from before that I knew. One of my closest childhood friends was and still lives in New York. And it was just very intense, but a very fulfilling part of my life. I had a girlfriend at the time who was super supportive, who had also come in from India. So we kind of knew each other. And it was just like a really fun, really intense, and really interesting part of my life.
Yeah. So when you decided to study abroad, did you intend to always stay back in the US, or it was like, we'll figure it out as we go? Because so many people say, I'm going to only go for a couple of years and then come back. And then 18 years later, they're still there.
Actually, no, I don't think I was in that camp. I was very clear that I wanted to be in a position of choosing whether I wanted to stay in or not, right? So I was just really focused on going through, getting an offer, and then taking my chances through the H-1B lottery, and just being there in a way, being in the US in a way that gave me stability enough to decide what I wanted to do next, and ideally be in a situation where I could move to India if I needed to, then move back to the US and like kind of have that flexibility. So that has always been the intention. So I didn't really have any plans of trying to move back after a couple of years. I just always wanted to establish roots here. And then because I know that I have roots in India, those are not going away. It's just a matter of establishing a foothold here as well.
Yeah. And how did the lottery turn out? Was it more stressful than you imagined or less?
I have to be honest, and I feel really lucky about this. Almost all of my immigration processes have been as smooth as they can be. So I managed to get my lottery the first attempt. Nice. And then, subsequently all of the immigration steps have been just as smooth as they can be. I feel really lucky about that.
I mentioned on this show many times that there are countries like Canada where getting in is hard, but once you are in, there's a path to citizenship. And then there's countries like the UAE where everybody can come in and get a work visa, but nobody's ever becoming a citizen for the most part. And the US is in this weird part of that quadrant where it's hard to get in and hard to become a citizen or naturalize.
Yeah.
So, and this is, in Seattle especially with so many people in tech, I see how this hangs like a sword on people's head, that their green card date isn't coming in, or they've been in the country for 15 years and they're still on this visa and they can't leave the country because they don't have a stamping appointment and all of that. So despite that, this country keeps attracting the best of the talent. So what are your thoughts on why that happens?
I don't know. I feel like that's got a lot of elements, and some of it is historical and some of it is more recent. But I think in general, I've always viewed the US as a magnet for attracting the top talent from around the world, because the US has always recognized that even though you can be very capital rich, you still need like human capital as well. Yeah. And so they have, at least in my opinion, been very smart about allocating capital between industries and universities and education, and like just attracting research funding, grants, and like the top tier brains. And it has really been very effective. You could see it, right? Like in terms of the innovations in the US that have happened over the past 75 years, if you will.
Yeah.
Almost every major technology today has its origins in research labs and universities in the US in some form or the other. And that's just testament to a very deliberate way of attracting talent. So I think that has been remarkably successful. But with that success comes the problem of how do you make sure that you're getting the right people, you're getting them in the right at the right pace, and that you're not crowding out what you already have. So I think that's been a tricky balance, and the pendulum swings hard in either direction. Like, for example, I would imagine right now we're in a state where just the sheer crush of the affordability challenges we're facing, just the sheer volumes of people that are being displaced due to so many phenomena around the world is creating such a big immigration pressure that not just the US, countries around the world have to try and like figure out what's a good balance to make sure what they have can be retained and still attract and like support innovation and talent in some ways. So it's tricky, and I think US is right now sort of in that phase of reevaluating how much it wants to do that, and what impact this might have. It's hard to say, but it's definitely going to potentially affect the pace of progress in certain things that we're like tracking right now against competitors like China.
I say that how the Chinese built the railroad, it's usually Indians who are building the current AI infrastructure, and I didn't realize how many Indians were not tech but still integral to everything. Like in Amazon, the supply chain teams, the design engineers, all of these teams are also very heavily filled with Indians. And it's a group that, while it is very affluent as a minority, because all of these people are on work visas, they don't really have any voice in terms of being able to vote or influencing public policy or any of those things. So when you have all these tech layoffs, no one's really making any noise about it, even though so many people who are otherwise good citizens contributing a lot of tax dollars and their talent. But if you have like a warehouse closing down and it's everyday Americans who are affected, there's a lot of noise about it.
Right.
So it's a weird situation to be in, where you're so integral as a population to the country, and you're contributing, and you're being more or less good citizens or good permanent residents or whatever you want to call it, but you don't have that kind of clout that other subgroups of the population do.
I think that's really fair, and I think you pointed out the really important piece of this puzzle, right? Like, if you don't have voice in the political process, you really can't affect change, no matter how much you contribute otherwise. And I think that's really important.
And to be fair, a lot of, especially here in Seattle, Indian population lives in its own bubble. I have friends who are only Indians or from the same part of India that they are from.
I see.
They have not really taken an effort to assimilate per se. One of my guests said that for Indian people, sometimes assimilation is a Costco membership. Like, that's the extent of it. They feel like everyone here makes $400,000 a year. Everyone drives a Tesla Model X, whatever. Because of my property management business, I see the full spectrum of American society, from the property owners like these techies who have 5 and 10 properties, to people who are one like broken car problem away from not being able to make their rent.
Right.
And it has really made me appreciate that, where this is coming from in terms of this anti-immigration or anger with like all these people are coming here and taking our jobs, etc. In all of that, the other thing is that when I have Indian clients, I know at some point they're going to move back to India. And I've seen a lot of Indians just get fed up of waiting for their green card process to happen. So they've just left India, back for India. They say, I'm going to go back to Bangalore or Hyderabad. It's a comfortable life. $100,000 goes way further in India than $300,000 goes in Seattle. Absolutely. And our kids are young. They'll have their grandparents around them. So they came, they never assimilated. So for them to go back is very easy. And I think I'm on the side of the spectrum where I've tried as much to assimilate as possible. This show being one of those things, I watch local sports, whatever. So for me, it's much harder to go back because now I'm more tuned to the way of life here than I am to that part of the world.
Completely.
Yeah. So let's talk more about what you have been doing in your career. I don't think we've had anybody from the energy sector. So give us some of the interesting work that you've done so far in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a very fascinating sector. So please stop me if I go on a tangent. But I would say, I'm going to tie it back to the point you raised, which is that there's so much innovation. And for example, AI and tech right now, right? It's not just about people who are making the AI chips or training the models, it's about the entire infrastructure that supports it. And energy is a really important part of that. And right now in my role at National Grid, we provide electric and gas to customers in Massachusetts, New York, and the UK. And we're seeing this huge demand for data centers and energy to power these data centers. And one of the challenges that we're thinking about is how do we provide clean, reliable energy to these types of operations as fast as possible without having other customers pay more, without making the affordability crisis worse. So it's a challenge that involves not just the technical sides of how do you get energy to these data centers in the most cost-effective way, but also how do you create the policies, how do you create the regulations, and even just the competitive mindset to be able to support these industries in a sustainable way that can balance all of the requirements that we have, at least we have as a utility towards our customers and the societies that we serve. So that's a very broad challenge. And within that, as you can imagine, there's lots of different angles and pieces. So as part of corporate strategy, my role looks at understanding the technical sides with the policy and regulatory sides, with the commercial sides of how data centers work, and just putting it all together to be able to get these data centers connected as fast as possible in the lowest cost way. So that's just one example of the type of problems we think about. Other is I have, in my previous roles right up to now, have been looking through technologies that can help us deliver the energy transition. So a lot of places, including the West Coast where you are in Seattle, Vancouver, over here on the East Coast, we have targets to reduce our emissions significantly by 2050.
Yeah.
And some of those are binding legal targets, others are sort of voluntary commitments. But I personally view it as important to keep that lens in mind for every work decisions that we make. So I've been following long duration storage technologies. I've been following SMRs, those small modular reactors, just essentially innovations across the board that can help us deliver the energy transition. We're only about 25 years away from it. There's not a whole lot of time. And at the same time, there's so much challenge against technologies that are so expensive right now. Offshore wind is expensive. There's no way to say it's not, but it is so critical. How do you navigate those kind of challenges and concerns, right? It's both sides have valid points and you have to listen and you have to find those compromises. And that's the kind of work that I really love doing and thinking about, because there's no one easy answer. It's not about, hey, if we just get this execution right, we can do it. Or, hey, if we can just solve this problem, everything else will flow. Yeah. It's about complexity and about negotiating and compromises along the way so that you can still get as close as possible to the most optimal solution. Optimal is a terrible word, but the best possible solution for as many people as possible.
So you said some of these are legally binding targets for reducing emissions or impact. Some of these are voluntary. How interested are the clients? Because there's a big race to build as much data center capacity right now as possible.
Yeah.
And how front and center is that objective from the client's end, or the clients generally don't care much and this is something you have to push?
I don't think the clients don't care. Actually, it's actually very fascinating. The moment when you recognize that both the client and the policymakers want the same thing. And it's interesting because what the clients want is the lowest cost energy possible, right? It's beneficial for a data center to connect 6 months earlier than its competitor, right? That's just that much more training time, that much more revenue time.
Yeah.
But once you're up and running, it's the marginal cost. It's how much less you can pay per token
Yeah.
per unit of compute that will make you competitive against another entity that's paying a lot more in energy or water. And that's where sustainability actually comes in, because if you were to power your data centers with renewables, basically things that have zero variable cost, once that you're up and running, you're basically going to beat competition just because you can do your workflows at way less cost than somebody who's paying per gallon of fuel or like per, like volume of natural gas. It's just the competitiveness will show up then. And that realization, when the clients have that, I think is powerful. Like, for example, I already know big data centers that have not even been online for more than like 2 or 3 years are completely renovating and reimagining their cooling systems to cut down or shave off even like cents off of their like entire operating costs. Because it matters. And like sustainability and doing things more efficiently go hand in hand with saving money. And that kind of a realization is, I think, what we as utilities have always been pushing because of efficiency and our mandates to push energy efficiency. But in this context, I think it becomes even more important to not lose sight of that piece. So it's a journey. It requires conversation, but I think it's really satisfying to see when both sides kind of can see that same picture and understand how.
That's good to know. Let's take our second break now. And when we come back, we'll continue talking more about your work, which I'm finding very interesting. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
Imagine home. The smell of coffee, the sound of a lawnmower, the sun's warmth on your face. Free to be yourself, surrounded by love that helps you grow. This is a place to call home. That's an American dream we all deserve. But in 50% of U.S. states, you could legally be denied housing if you are LGBTQ+. Get the facts and hear real stories at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diaspora, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diaspora offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diaspora Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Find our app in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and take us with you wherever you go. Alternative Talk AM 1150.
Welcome back to Diaspora on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Shah, energy sector executive and outdoors lover, and we'll find out more about that in the coming segment. Before we jump back into the conversation, if you like listening to our show, please consider following us on Instagram or leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. So before the break, we had a very interesting conversation about data center energy and how to make it sustainable. I only learned recently of all the strides that India is making as it adds power. This is India is not replacing energy capacity. It's still, increasing capacity to meet needs. And I'm sure you may remember when we were growing up in the 90s, power cuts were a thing all around the country. Bombay, we didn't have that problem so much, but it was a thing. Like in Hindi, you say light gayi hai, like there's no power. But India has done a lot to add a capacity which is sustainable to begin with. So what are your views on that, and how important is that to the kind of global target of meeting net neutral?
Absolutely. And I think India has a huge role to play, not only because of how carbon intensive its operations are today, but also because of how much of renewable energy lies available in the entire subcontinent. I think there's just a whole lot that we could be doing, and the government has already been pushing on it. Like when my very first careers, right after I finished my MBA at Yale and came back at PwC, was for looking at the National Solar Mission, looking at giant gigawatt scale solar PV plants in Rajasthan and Gujarat, in places that have large barren tracts of land and so much sunlight. Like that's like the most abundant resource we have. It's just about capturing it and getting it to where it needs to be. So I was really privileged to be part of some of those projects. We worked with, at the time when Prime Minister Modi was still the chief minister in Gujarat, I worked on Vibrant Gujarat, which were these investment fairs that happened every year where solar was really important. So I've been tracking the renewables industry in India. I think there's a lot of potential, not just in solar, but even wind. And if you want to go further, to reconsider and like really think about the role of nuclear energy in India, because we have resources that we can use for domestic fuel production, but really we have all of the technology that we need to be trying to push these zero carbon solutions. I know coal has a big role in India right now, but it is just so uncompetitive. It is so expensive to manufacture, to produce, to clean, to burn. It's just very inefficient, and it's a lot of subsidies that are holding up the coal worldwide, the coal market. And I think India and other countries in the world have to really think about what is the best use of that subsidy dollar. Is it to prop up an industry that just is fundamentally uneconomic, but so entrenched that it makes sense to keep it going? Or is it to take that money and move it into technologies that are right now really expensive, but you know that in the next 5, 7, 10 years, if properly invested in, will be significantly cheaper, not to mention cleaner for all customers. So I think India has the perfect mix of what it needs. It has the natural resources, it has the talent, the brain power, the labor force to build things at giant scales. And it really has the industry, it has the sort of engines that can use all of this energy in a way that will really help reestablish our economy in India in a different way. And I think China has provided a really good roadmap for how to do this. And I think even more broadly, Asian countries have just done a remarkable job of just being very systematic and deliberate about planning, not for the next year or not for the next 5 years, but really decadal thinking in how to transform entire societies. And I think that's a really powerful force.
Yeah, that's good to know and very interesting. I have a friend from London Business School, Tushar Devidyal. He's got a solar business, I would say, appliances based on solar power, so off-grid solar, and I think fridges and things like that. And he transitioned from pesticides to solar about 10 years ago, and his business has been doing very well. So I'll add a link to his business in the show notes.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I think like passive solar technologies, especially in India, again, like water heating, cooking, all of it just in rural places is almost entirely done through firewood, which is really like okay as long as you're not cutting down forests. But with the kind of pressures that we have, I think that's happening. So your friend's technologies could have like a huge impact in those kind of locations.
And the other reason I would find it hard to move back to India is the air quality, and that's something that we have to move away from coal and firewood. And I think, Indian car emissions standards are on par with the world, or sometimes better, if I'm not mistaken. But like the air quality in Delhi is like, it's a nightmare.
It is.
And I think clean energy will go some ways, at least, in helping solve that problem.
Definitely.
You're an avid traveler, and I know you've done some very interesting types of trips and journeys. So tell us more about some of these journeys, but also I'm a big fan of this, why it is important to travel.
There's been many journeys, right? And like as a fellow person who likes traveling, you always meet interesting people. But the main reason I love traveling, and a lot of my travel has been solo travel, the main reason I love that is because it lets you really immerse yourself in the place you're at. It really lets you absorb and observe different cultures and different ways of doing things or thinking. And that perspective, just like challenging status quo and learning to look and appreciate at things from a different perspective, I think has been really fascinating for me. So, obviously there are the major places around the world that are tourist hotspots for good reasons, right? They're like things that you can't see anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
But then there are also very small, off the beaten path kind of locations where you can really feel a place and a culture and a people. And I think those kinds of experiences are really important. So I kind of I try and balance when I go to a different country. First of all, I try and like stay in one place for 2 weeks. I don't like moving around too much once I get to a place. But then second, I always try and create experiences where I can experience both the city as well as the rural side of wherever I go to. And I think that kind of a balance is very refreshing because it lets you see both sides of the place you're in and the types of people that you interact with. And it, like, the thing that really strikes me is that every time I travel, I feel less like I'm an American traveling to a different location, or I'm an Indian traveling to a different location. I just feel like I am part of humanity, and everybody just looks different and speaks differently and prefers different things, but it's essentially the same people. And I think that feeling of just like a giant collective family is really powerful, and you don't feel out of place, and you don't feel like a tourist. If I embrace that mindset, and that's just been really refreshing to me.
What are your top 3 moments, not destinations, but moments during your various travels where you were like, man, I'm so grateful to be in this moment right now? And like, I've had those all around the world where at that moment nothing else matters, and you're in that moment and you just smile like this is amazing.
The most recent one has been just a few months ago. I went for one of my really close friends' wedding. He had a destination wedding in Bali, so it was just really nice to be there with him and his wife and just friends I hadn't seen in a long time. But then I did manage to escape away from there for a couple of days, and I went to the Komodo Dragon National Park, which is sort of like 2 hours away from Bali. And to go on a 2-day sort of stay on a boat, scuba diving, snorkeling trip with pretty much complete strangers. But it was just fascinating because like it was 2 days with people that you were forced to be in close proximity with on a boat. But then when you put on that wetsuit, sorry, you don't need a wetsuit, but when you put on your diving gear and you go underwater to one of the most pristine ecosystems, marine ecosystems, see the coral, see like baby sharks nursing amongst the coral, and just like the sheer diversity of life around you. And it's the first thing you kind of go in right before the sun is rising to be able to see the manta rays go out fishing and like just be in the water the whole day and like look at how, as time changes, as the intensity of sun changes, as the storm roll in, how life is responding and adapting and just reacting to you and to everything else going on is profound. And to do it with like pretty much strangers who then become such good friends that you're planning the next trip with them already is a great feeling, right? Like it lets you connect to not just nature, but also people, and it makes it all worthwhile. I think traveling, to those who like it, is like, I think one of the most powerful experiences you can have to ground yourself, to recharge yourself, and to like really find meaning, if you will.
So that makes me think of one such trip I had not so recently, maybe 3 years ago, and our friend Ketan was with me on it. It was 4 people, 4 guys. I knew all of them. They didn't know each other until the trip, but we all had some sort of University of Texas connection. We went on a ferry to Vancouver Island, and then from the town that we were staying in, it was a 300-kilometer one-way trip, and we did the return trip in the same day. But you drive 300 kilometers. The last 75 kilometers is gravel, and then you reach this beach, which is the northernmost tip of Vancouver Island. And on the other side is Japan. It's Pacific Ocean. You don't see a soul there the entire time because it's so remote. There's no cell phone connection. Once you leave your car, it's like a 5-kilometer hike through actual like just bare country to get to this beach. And we did that trip, and just standing there in silence, looking at that ocean, it was like one of those moments that I described earlier. So
and actually, I know we probably will mess up your timing a bit, but because you mentioned Ketan, our mutual friend, I do have to say it. We took a trip to Hawaii earlier this year for his wedding, and one of the things that struck to me was we were there just as when the volcano went off, and we were there at night to go to the Mauna Kea Observatory, which is one of the highest observatories in the northern hemisphere. the evening we went, it was cloudy, couldn't see anything. But
Yeah.
that same evening at midnight, everything cleared up. The heavens
Yeah.
cleared up. I got into my car, jumped, and drove into the darkness to the top to see the Milky Way laid out in front of me with the
Wow.
glow of the volcano to the side. It was just one of the most magical experiences
Yeah.
being on that
Yeah.
mountaintop. And I think there's tons of people with tons of experiences, but
Yeah.
it's acknowledging and recognizing that's unique. I think that's
Yeah.
that's really important.
I think we could do like a whole separate episode just on our travel experiences.
We should.
Yeah, because it makes me think of now more and more,
Yeah.
things I've seen in New Zealand, in Alaska. And, one of the reasons I love living in the Pacific Northwest is that all this beauty is so close by. In Vancouver, you can drive 30 minutes from downtown and do night kayaking. And there's like this bioluminescent plankton in the water. And when it's not there, it's so dark that you can't see your hand in front of you. And I have a fear of the ocean at night. So I was like, I'm
Yeah.
going to do this. And again, one of the best experiences ever. So, but yeah, maybe we'll sync up one more time to talk about more travel. Let's go into our weekly segments now. So let's spin the wheel and see what we land on. Okay, this is our crowd favorite, Mango Memories. Most people from our part of the world have some great memories related to eating mangoes in its various forms. So what is your favorite mango memory?
Oh man, like I am so excited for this. I'm glad I got this one because when I was growing up, we lived in the heart of Delhi, right? So it was like, obviously you can buy mangoes, but we were lucky because our house had actually 3 mango trees on property, one in the front, one on the side, and one at the back.
Yeah.
And each year, one of those trees would bear fruit. So basically every summer we'd have to get our gardeners and other people to come help get all that fruit down.
Yeah.
And we had baskets of mangoes,
Yeah.
which we gave out to friends and family.
Yeah.
And my mom and my aunt would make pickle out of mango.
Yeah.
So we'd have pickle for like months and months, and we'd send out bottles of that. But there was still so much mango, so we just let it out, and we'd get like parrots and birds just coming and
Wow.
eating.
Yeah.
It was just like a riot it was just mango mania, if you will, at our house for that 1 month when it was all down and being actively processed. It was like a mini industry.
You have these hay baskets and you keep the mangoes there while they ripen.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Mango.
While they're still ripening.
Yeah.
But then the raw ones you can turn into pickle. It was just like a whole thing. And
You're
by the end of it, I have to say, I got a little sick of mango. Like after like a month of just like everything mango, like mango milkshakes and mango ice cream and like mango with mango ice cream. It was just like all mango all the time. It was
So you're the first one to bring it up in pickle form. After people talk about the amras, the actual fruit, memories of eating it, memories of plucking it. I've even had someone talk about raw mango with spices on it, but you're the first one to talk about it in the pickle format. So great.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening to Diaspora. We hope you enjoyed hearing Jay's interesting story. Remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about what we talked about today. Diaspora is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning and connection. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows wherever you get your podcasts. And lastly, if you know someone who has a story that can be shared on our show, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media handles, and we'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. Until then, take care, stay curious, and Jay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Addy, thank you for having me. This has been a pleasure. Good luck.